Live is live. Jeffrey Dahmer was killed in prison over 2 decades ago. And now the story is resurfacing in 2022 due to the new release of the Jeffrey Dahmer movie on Netflix. His father did an exclusive interview with the late and great Larry King a decade ago. Now let's watch.
The focus now shifts from the who to the why.
I just thank the Lord that me and Dahmer didn't get along. Otherwise, you might have seen my head on a shelf over there.
We're back with Lionel and Sherry Dahmer, the parents of the late Jeff Dahmer. A downward spiral, as I understand, begins, right? You learn from your mother that Jeff has full-size male mannequin in his closet. I must tell you something seriously wrong, right?
We thought again it was related to his homosexual desires.
You then knew he was homosexual?
Yes. Oh, yes.
And you knew it. How'd you handle that?
Not well.
Not very well. I'm a believer in absolute truth. I think people that don't believe in absolute truth are maybe prone to be more liberal with error. And I believe that the Bible teaches that is something that you should avoid, just like too much food, too much drink, too much of anything. And I took him, something to be conquered, I felt. So I took him to a psychiatrist, and really it was for mostly, at that point, the drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And the...
Did his brother have anything in that area? His brother gay?
No.
No, you say his brother's married, you have grandchildren,
Yes.
right? Okay, so the spiral start, he sets up a satanic altar in his house. He dabbles in the occult, right? You're learning all this, but still no idea of murder.
Right.
But when you see satanic cult, isn't that some sort of... Well, you wrote in your book, more than anything, I allowed myself to believe that there was a line in Jeff, a line he wouldn't cross. It was a line that divided the harm he did to himself from the harm he might do to someone else. And you wrote, in the eyes of parents, I think children always seem just a blink away from redemption. No matter to what depths we watch them sink, we believe they need only grasp the lifeline and we can still pull them safely to shore. In other words, you knew there was something wrong. You knew he was bothered. Something was seriously wrong. But you never thought that he would harm someone else.
No.
Harm himself, yes. Did you think he might commit suicide?
He had tendencies to denigrate himself. And he even told his grandmother one time, well, if I die, just throw me down the field. So he did not have a big self-image.
In 1988, September 26, he moves out of his grandfather's house. He brings home a Laotian teen and molests him. That leads to an arrest, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did that perk some sign into you, that he had molested someone?
Oh, yes. We hired someone, an attorney, to represent him, and I argued for a very, very firm follow-up on a psychological basis. Don't let him out. His attorney actually let him out 4 months.
Attorney let him out?
Let him out.
You mean the court
Wanted to let him. The court let him out.
So we could not stop him. Lionel wrote a letter to the judge requesting that Jeff get psychological help.
He let him out early, earlier than what his sentence had been given.
And he got probation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And 1 year work release program, right? Mm-hmm. Did you think he had gotten through it?
I tried to hook him up with another psychologist, but he didn't. Jeff did not attend on a regular basis. I didn't think he got through it. I thought at that time it would take a long time.
Because then he had another problem with a naked Asian teenager, right? Mm-hmm. So these things are all leading up to the worst day of your life.
Yes.
July 23rd, 1991. Jeff's arrested for homicide investigation. Of 17, did you know it was 17 then when he was
not
arrested?
Not at first at all. No.
What did they say at first?
I had
There were several.
been called by Sherry that there were a few involved in a homicide. I didn't.
Who told you?
The police called, and the attorney.
They had arrested him.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And
Where were the bodies?
There were virtually no bodies in most cases because he had destroyed them.
He had eaten parts of them and destroyed
He had eaten
them.
parts, but he had cut them up and destroyed them. He had put them in trash bags. That's why there was no hard line of bodies
Actually,
to trace.
Actually, the eating part was more like, you know, how the ancient Indians used to eat parts of humans, hoping that they would gather strength from that. You know, Jeff told me that that was a very, very small part. It was a part, but very much overblown by the media.
But he killed the people.
But he did
viciously,
dispose of their bodies, yes.
Did he first deny it to you?
Oh, you mean when he was finally arrested, July 1991? No, he did not deny it.
He admitted it?
Oh, yes. Yes.
How did he, where were you, what were the circumstances when he tells you this is what I did?
I met him at the Milwaukee County Jail. I went down to meet with him.
Did you go?
Oh, yes, every time. We visited with him.
But the first time I'm talking about, when he tells you what he did.
I hugged him and I said, Jeff, and he said to me, I really messed up this time, which is an understatement. And I said, Jeff, you really need help. The only way I can see is to have you judged insane so that you'll be put into a psychiatric hospital to really find out what's wrong. He hesitated at first, but later on, he really wanted to find out what was causing him to do these things.
Did he ever plead insanity?
Oh, yes. I mean, through advice of me and the attorney.
The court rejected the insanity, right? Found him guilty of the murders.
I would never put him and us or anyone through this insanity trial if I had known that this was, I believe, what would we call it? A situation where they wanted to assuage the community. There was
this was a trial to help appease the victims' families. They needed that trial.
God, certainly he was sick.
Obviously.
But one attorney told me that they watched it and they said, oh my God, his attorney, a 14-year-old or an apprentice attorney, a journeyman attorney could have done that. They were doing it, we felt, and
well, the families attended the trial, did they not? Did
yes.
you have a tough time facing the families of the people he killed?
Oh, yes. There were stares of hatred, comments.
At you?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We just sat just motionless and sick to our stomach.
Was there any thoughts of not attending the trial?
Only when they warned us not to. There were several days they said the temperatures were so high that we should not appear. So we did not go.
Did he take the stand?
No.
No.
We'll be right back with Lionel and Sherry Dahmer. Don't go away.
Did the defendant, Jeffrey L. Dahmer, have a mental disease? Answer, no. Question number 2 need not be answered. Counsel, do you have anything further for the jury?
I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you. I hate you. This is out of control. Don't with me, Jeffrey. I'll kill you. Look at me. I can kill you. I can kill you.
We're back with the Dahmers. There were accusations that there were racial things involved, right? Because many of the victims were Asian or black. Is that correct?
In all my conversation with Jeff, that was not a factor at all.
Were any of the killings Caucasian?
There was, yes.
At least 3 victims.
Yes.
Of course, this thing was wild headlines everywhere. How did you cope with that?
Not well. I sat with my mother, and our home was invaded by national as well as international photographers set up across the street on neighbors' porches, and ringing doorbells, tromping all over our yard and looking in, trying to see in our windows. It was horrible.
And Geraldo Rivera did this special on it, right?
He did.
And he portrayed him a brutal and sadistic killer. You were the epitome of the evil stepmother. What was that all about?
That was part of his hoorah. He also had a guy on there who was supposed to have been Jeff's lover. And we had a cease and desist letter put out to Geraldo because of all the things that he was doing and saying.
And Jeff signed an affidavit that this was not true, and it turned out later this fellow that appeared on Geraldo was a felon.
But they still went with it.
Yeah.
They ran parts of it.
Regardless of warning, these people still went with it.
How did you face the families?
Openly.
We talked.
You reached out.
Reached out with several of the families. Sherry was so wonderful in that regard. I couldn't have gotten through this without Sherry, first of all, let me say. And the way she had her demeanor with people, it causes people to melt. Some of these victims just...
You had to sit through the details of the aspects of these killings. You had to hear about them, right?
Oh, yeah.
How did that... It's your son. I can't imagine. How you dealt with it?
I can't either. To this day, I can't really see how I could. We both just sat there. Like
Did you look at him when these things were being described?
Well,
Yes.
Yes.
His back was to us, but of course.
Most of the time.
Of course.
Did he have remorse?
He read a statement that at the end that it sounded like he was remorseful.
I know the families of the victims will never be able to forgive me for what I have done. I promise I will pray each day to ask for their forgiveness when the hurt goes away, if ever. I have seen their tears, and if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. I am so very sorry.
He got a lot of mail, didn't he? He got hate mail. He even got love mail, right?
Oh, lots of good. He had lots of friends out there, supposedly, and people who loved him and cared about him.
They saw him as different from a Bundy or a Gacy.
What prison did he go to?
The Wisconsin Correctional Institution.
And how long was he in before he was killed?
Portage, Wisconsin.
Couple years?
It was
Several years.
2 or 3 years.
And it was a mentally ill inmate, right? How was he killed?
Well, you know, I talked with an attorney who has access to that prison quite intimately. And what happened was there was about 20 to 40 minutes of time where no one, that is the staff at the prison, no one knew the whereabouts of this person who took a barbell or the rod, the bar from weightlifting equipment, and hit it and bludgeoned Jeff to death.
In other words, they let him be loose for all that time without knowing the whereabouts of a prisoner.
This attorney said he was confident that it was something that was allowed to happen, as he put it.
What happened to that person?
He was found guilty. Of course, he was insane, and they sent him to another institution. I think it's in Virginia or wherever he's been moved.
How were you told about Jeff's death?
The warden called me at home and said...
Before the news media had it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And then, of course, I sent a friend at work up to be with Lionel when I had to tell Lionel that his son had been killed.
How old was he?
He was in his 30s.
33. And for the second time, I sat at my desk, totally numb, paralyzed, to get the news.
Did you have a burial? Did they give you the body?
It wasn't released for over a year.
He wanted to be cremated.
Yes.
And his mother, his natural mother, wanted the dead brain to be studied. I was all in favor before of having him studied by tomography while he was alive. We can really find something, perhaps, but not a dead brain. There were some scientists at Case Western Reserve that claimed they could tell why he acted like he did. And it's not possible with a dead person.
What eventually happened to the body?
Well, I played attorney, filed briefs, and appeared in Wisconsin court and won. The judge ruled in my favor not to turn this into a circus anymore.
You cremated him?
Yes.
Cremated him.
We had half the ashes and his mother the other half.
You have the ashes now?
We took care of them.
You took care
We put him to peace.
Why did they hold it for a year?
Because he was legal evidence.
Oh, in the trial of the person who killed him?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
He was legal evidence, so he was held.
How was
well
he
over a
handling
year.
prison?
How was who?
How was he dealing with prison, Jeff?
Jeff was, at first it was extremely hard, but then he sent away for 13 books. It's down in El Cajon, California, Institute for Creation Research. I told him about the place, and he bought 13 books that turned him from evolutionist into a creationist, and from there into a Christian. And he started handing out pamphlets and so forth, and talking with other prisoners, trying to...
So he was a born again.
He was, I'm sure, in talking with him, that it wasn't just a jailhouse conversion. I really believe that.
Because he wasn't going to get out.
No.
We'll be back with our remaining moments. Find out some things we might learn from this after this.
Dahmer was on janitor duty when his body was found in a blood-spattered bathroom. He had massive...
And the preliminary findings of the pathologist were that Mr. Dahmer died as a result of blunt force injury of head.
We're back with our remaining moments. Do we know why he killed?
Well, we don't know why he killed. I really believe there was a chance of finding that out had he not been murdered, and he had been studied extensively.
Could have been inability to interact with people.
That's part.
Back to the shyness, back to...
That's definitely part of it.
It was an overwhelming desire.
Yeah.
He admitted that. He had an overwhelming desire to have passive mates.
Even the psychiatrist that examined him for the purpose of the trial didn't really know why he did it. But he did tell me why he felt that he could do what he did, why he felt free to do what he did. He told me that, and this was after reading the books by these scientists on creation science, he felt that he was up from the slime, as he put it. You know, molecules to amoebas to Tulare type of a thing, evolution. That there was nothing, no direction by a God, no one to be accountable to, no one to answer to at all.
That's what he believed.
That's what he felt. That's why he felt he could just do whatever he wanted to. That's quite different from knowing the cause.
Did he ever explain to you why he ate even small parts of the body?
That goes back to, he did tell me that he felt that he just wanted to examine everything, as every possibility as far as control, having control.
And what do we learn from this?
Hopefully we learn to watch our children, monitor them, love them dearly, but be aware of any nuances. How do you know who's going to be a serial killer? There's still not that many profiles out there, and most parents are not that adept, or do they study their children in depth?
My wonderful ex-boss said, but for the grace of God, there I go. But there are people...
Have we had any exhaustive studies of
serial killers or Jeff?
Serial killers.
Serial killers, yes.
Yes, and you know, there's a certain profile, of course, 34 and white and so forth and so on.
Angry loner.
Yes.
But he's different.
He
Torturing animals.
was not a typical
But he didn't torture
profile.
animals. He didn't fit the profile. Well, he fit some of the profile. Shy, that sort of thing.
So you're saying if you have children that show offbeat keys, very, very shy, early liquor, get them some attention. Liquor should have been a sign, right?
Yes.
It should have.
Yes.
It should have.
What's life like for the two of you now?
We're doing all right. We're retired. We have a lot of faith that has gotten us through this. And we have many good friends out there. You make friends, if you make friends in dire times, they stick with you. So we've lost a lot of family, a lot of people we knew, but we have a lot of friends who are proud of us, who are not ashamed of who we are. Again, because we've done nothing wrong. So life is good.
Do you have cousins that stopped talking to you?
Oh.
There were a few cousins that wanted to distance. Yes, distance from us.
Are there other people named Dahmer?
It's a very uncommon name, and I imagine that this is rough on them. There aren't many as you go from city to city and look at the phone books. There aren't many, but I imagine it's extremely rough for them to go through this.
You ever run into relatives that are victims?
We have several. We have a very close friend, the sister of one of the victims, and she and we are sounding boards.
Sherry engendered that relationship.
Well, we met at a civil trial.
With the
yes.
sister of a victim.
Yes, and it's helpful, Larry, to share thoughts and feelings with someone who's on the other side. She wants to know how we feel, and of course we want to know how she feels, and that's healing.
We arranged a meeting with her and Jeff at the prison. And then later, when he was murdered,
she was at the service, the memorial
she was
service.
at the service, and she said to me, Lionel, I forgive Jeff.
Very Christian thing to do.
Oh, yes, she's a wonderful woman.
Lionel, honestly, you have any guilt?
Well, I'm not. Sometimes I feel like I do, but that in that, I mean, I'm not a participant in it, and yet I feel guilty that I didn't spend more time with Jeff rather than with my wife. The common knowledge is spend the time, make the relationship with your wife right, and everything will fall in place with your children. But it didn't happen that way.
Anybody gonna do a movie at all?
There's a possibility.
There's a couple of guys named Ambler and Dickinson in Kansas City who would like to make a feature film of the whole story.
A father's story.
A father's story.
If you would cooperate?
Yes.
With Father's Day coming Sunday?
Yes.
And if it will help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
Easy. Great meeting you.
Thank you, sir.
It was
Thank you.
wonderful meeting you.
Lionel and Sherry Dahmer, the parents of the late Jeff Dahmer.